information. So if you feel like you want to stop and discuss, or if you feel like you already know most of it, because I didn't really know what level we are at, so I'm teaching at very low level. So if you think, oh, I know it, let's not waste time, we'll skip and move on to something more exciting. So yes, today's talk is about how to connect research with teaching and how to go about it. Most of us come from different backgrounds. Some of us are literature people, others are culture people, and most language leaders actually don't really have training in second language acquisition. And in the meantime, the field of second language acquisition is becoming increasingly more theorized and more standardized. So if you want to go out with your research, follow a certain standard rather than go a little bit authentic. So follow the standard and be on the safe side. Today we have a big laundry list. But again, as I'm saying, we can skip certain things and move on. So feel free to interrupt and interject. So we're going to discuss what is considered a classroom, and what is classroom-based research, and how to begin your research. Also, I'm going to mention a few important things like human subjects, because it might interfere considerably with your agenda. Where to look for inspirations, then we'll look at some theoretical frameworks, and then we'll just move on to the very bones of the research, how to actually do it. And at the end, we'll examine a few recent studies that just came out within the last couple of years. Some of them came out just this year, so I'm excited about them. I found them interesting, and they actually demonstrate where the field is going. So again, I don't want to bring studies that are already outdated. I'm bringing the most recent studies that you want to copy, follow, model upon them. So what is a classroom? Of course, no exact definition of what classroom is. It could be just one course. It could be a course that you teach. Or it could be connected classes, connected in various ways. It could be sections of the same course. Or it could be collaborating courses of different proficiency levels. Or it could be same level of language proficiency across all languages. So it's all considered classroom. And also we can consider or do research within sequence classes. We want to study, for instance, how students perform on a certain task across levels within the program. So, or across, again, different languages at different proficiency levels. So it still all falls under the category of classroom research. And common beliefs about, even among some people who actually carry out research, is that classroom research must focus on the effects of pedagogical intervention. What is pedagogical intervention? It's some kind of teaching tool you implement in your class. For instance, you decide, okay, I want to switch all quizzes from paper and pencil on online and provide immediate feedback. Because you know, with paper and pencil quizzes, you mark, you grade, and then there is a lapse in time before the students actually read your comments. So if we switch to the online quizzes, and students will be given feedback right away, whether it's going to affect their production, whether it's going to affect their learning, this is something to research, and this would fall exactly under the category of pedagogical intervention. And also there is a common belief that classroom research must focus on what students do, what their skills. And this, if you look at the actual research that is published, it's not like this. It might include this, but more and more research actually focuses on teachers, differences between teachers, on teachers' beliefs, on teachers' practices, on teachers coming from different cultures, native speaker teachers versus non-native speaker teachers. So it's already not learners who are in focus. And it's, in terms of whether pedagogical intervention is being really addressed, it's another myth. More and more often I see studies that, and just recent study by our colleague, you probably know him, Bill Johnston. He published authored article on ethnography. It's an ethnographic study on ecology of the classroom, how materials communicating with behaviors, with procedures. So that's where the field is going, and it's nice to know. So again, what I've said, it's not just pedagogical intervention that constitutes the classroom study. So what is classroom-based research? It's funny that it was defined some years ago, but it's still very applicable. Yes, it's anything that goes on in the classroom, pretty much anything that is happening within the context of a classroom, and again, classroom considered as various settings, cross-sectional, continuous, connected. It's still a classroom-based research. Where to begin? Especially for those of us who are coming from literary background, a cultural background, and intuitive teachers, just reflect on your teaching activities and what works, what doesn't. You must already have certain intuitions about teaching, and you must already have some concerns or questions about the effectiveness of your teaching or performances. So you already have certain questions. For instance, does unit review result in students better scores on the unit test? It's a legitimate question. And you might research it, and you might eventually develop more questions about it, whether it should be more structured review, whether review should be more communicative, whether review should be in the same format as the test. So all of these questions would kind of expand from the initial question. Another question that you might ask yourself, for instance, do clauses on the margin actually simplify learning or benefit the learning and result in incidental vocabulary learning? Like you didn't teach it, but students still learn. It's a legitimate question, and you might want to set out to investigate it. Also, what's the next step? The next step is to collect data. Once you know your question, you start collecting data, and you already have a vast collection of data. You have test scores, you have students writing, perhaps some of you use online thread discussions or any other ways of students' output. So this is something for you to use. Also, you can examine your own beliefs, the way you're changing your understanding of teaching practices. You might investigate your teacher identity, and it's another huge area. I'm not going to talk about it today, but this is a huge area of studies, introspective studies of teacher identity, how teachers develop new sense of self across years of their career. So it's a legitimate study, done as a narrative study, and it's something for you to consider. Or it could be done as a survey. You can just poll your colleagues or colleagues from different languages. You can create a survey about teachers' beliefs, for instance. And we're going to look at a study today done in the late 90s about student and teachers' beliefs on the importance of grammar instruction. And the study was fascinating because it showed that students do believe that grammar is important, while teachers disagree. The researcher comes to the conclusion that it's important to know what the students actually believe in, because when you teach, you won't kind of overlap with their beliefs. So at least take it into consideration. If you believe that something doesn't work, but your students believe that it does, so you might expect some clashes and some not fulfilled expectations. Next thing, articulate your findings after you've done the collection of data. Articulate your conclusions and findings, and of course share your research with colleagues and students. Students always welcome this opportunity. You wouldn't believe it, but they actually like you supporting your statements. If you say, well, this is important for you, interactions, lots of interactions with peers. And most students don't believe that it's good because they think that they only learn other mistakes. And if you tell them, okay, I have this research, I have this data that doesn't support this assumption, and in fact, peer-to-peer interaction improves your learning, and this is my data, students would appreciate it and they would trust you more on the subject. Also, of course, present locally. I hope linguistics forums or your specific language forums that nationally and internationally and internationally. And this, don't forget that there are outlets for doing so. This is just a little thing that might interfere with your studies. If you want to go public, if you want to publish, this is something you need to obtain. You need to have IRB approval. And because most of your studies are classroom-based, it's an exempt study, which is relatively easy. It's very quick process. You would still have to do the paperwork. Yes, it's unpleasant, but it's just a few forms. It's doable. That's what I'm saying. It's doable. In our institution, it only takes a week or so. So it's not a big deal. And if you need assistance with this, they help you. If you need assistance, come to us and we'll help you. So it's not something difficult in particular. Where to look for inspiration? Read professional journals. These are helpful. You know where the field is going, what is happening, what is popular. And again, either go with your language, or you can kind of cast a broader net so that you know what's going on across the field. And I'm just listing a few most influential journals here. The PowerPoint is going to be posted online, so I'm not going to spend time on that. So another thing, especially if you want to publish, and if you first time publish in person, this is definitely a resource for you. This is how to become published, how to get through this process. And again, there are lots of this outlets. Explore them, go through these links, you will find something interesting for yourself. Especially if you do, it's just one little thing I wanted to mention, if you do computer-assisted research, most of it done online and published online. So there is no scorn should be cast on this kind of publishing, because all CAL is published online. So this is actually considered prestigious, as prestigious as a print outlet. And of course, there are so many people here on campus who can be your colleagues, mentors, helpers, or people like you can just run by them your ideas and say, well, what do you think? Is it worth it to pursue? How should I go about it? So networking within your local community and find them. Perhaps monetary inspiration can be more effective. There is this grant offered by our local Center for Language, Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning. They offer scholarship of teaching and learning grants. If you connect research with classroom, you can get support in the amount of up to $6,000 if your research carries over several years. So the startup price, I think it's 2,000 or 3,000, but still it's something to consider because you can spend this money on a person who would do data collection for you, who would do data coding for you, who would do transcribing for you. Something definitely to consider. Let's go back to presentation. And for this year, we already missed the deadline. It's usually in February, so it's like something to remember and shoot for. It's competitive, but it's still feasible. Just to show you how relevant classroom research is, the most influential journal in our field, the Modern Language Journal, in 2015 published 30 studies, 30 original studies classrooms, and only 7 outside of the classroom. So this shows the importance of this. This is an important issue, and it might be a little bit scary, I do understand this, but we can go around it or approach it in a more simplistic manner. Once you know what you research, what you want to research, just do Google Scholar or go through professional journals, see other research on the topic, and it will give you an idea what kind of framework is usually used for this type of topic. Also, most commonly used frameworks within classroom research so far, and perhaps the easiest or most intuitive social approaches like community of practice approach, or those approaches use interactional hypothesis, basically saying that learning comes from interaction, that learning is a social thing. It's not something innate like universal grammar. You are not born with this ability for language, and it's not developed. It doesn't develop by itself. You need to interact, and eventually you move from peripheral speaker of the language, from peripheral member of the society to central member of the society. You acquire more competence. And most of the languages kind of fall under this big social trend. Linguistic approaches, most of it deals with cross-linguistic influence, transfer, error correction, cognitive approaches that might require certain expertise that is not easily acquired, and you might need to train yourself more to be able to go with this kind of framework. Also, psychological approaches tend to be very technical if you try to follow one of those. So again, it's not something easily implemented. I wouldn't recommend to start out with this. So my favorite would be a social approach to language learning because it's easier and you can learn yourself rather than with most of the other approaches which would require more training. And this is basically the ideal way how to go about research. You have certain interpretation of a phenomena. For instance, I'm saying, oh yeah, absolutely. If students have a chance to speak out loud the vocabulary, evidence I'm considering, what should I take as my evidence? And then I'm thinking of what would be my instrument, how I make them to do it. Do I organize a special activity? Do I create a special test? Or am I going to just observe the classroom? So all this needs to be considered. And from this, you already go and you observe, you collect your data, then you code. Coding is another important procedure because you have this raw data, what to do with this data, how to count it, how to work with it. So coding is important, then you score it, your data and analyze finally. Some, I'll just give you examples, and if you already know them, we can just move on. One of the most influential model of second language learning is that by Ellen values talk. My favorite part, I won't spend much time on this, but my favorite part for classroom research is this. So what kind of knowledge base is needed for students to actually produce language? Implicit knowledge, which we probably can't test. It's only, it becomes evident when students perform, when they use language. Then we know, it's probably what they know implicitly, but I can't really touch it or measure. Explicit knowledge, they can tell you about the rules, they can do judgment testing, like grammatical judgment exercise, or they can do exercises or activities saying, oh, this speech act is appropriate, this is an appropriate request, but this request is inappropriate. So this is knowledge already. It's not implicit, it's explicit knowledge. They know some kind of rules. And of course, the knowledge of the world, extra-linguistic knowledge, what they know about social conventions, what they know about the culture, what they know about cultural schemas. For instance, if I want to know how a student produces a request, of course it's important that student or a group of students know that they have to take into consideration the power imbalance, status imbalance, distance. If they all know this, and if they know that request is actually part of the protocol, social protocol, it's not just a linguistic exercise. So this comes from here, where to actually use request. For instance, if we go with Japanese language and Japanese culture, correct me if I'm wrong, they often exercise apology in the form or in the function of thank you. So this is something to know, because, and it's a schema, it's a cultural schema. It's not language per se. So that's why I find this model particularly intriguing for us, for our research. This is already a difference between automated versus controlled production. This is like something for us very difficult to test, so I'll skip it. My other model that I would recommend for you to use, I kind of compressed together Ellis's and Schmidt's ideas and models. This is my favorite part, noticing hypothesis. It's actually Schmidt's idea that students, in order for students to get something inside from the input, they need to notice it. So if you want your students, for instance, you're presenting them with a grammatical construction, say accusative case, which is the case for a direct object, and you produce a lot of this accusative case, but you produce other cases as well. So they don't understand it. They don't particularly see the accusative case. They see blah, 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 instead of, oh, this is the continued, persistent input. I see the table, I see the lamp, I see the window. So I'm repeating the same over and over and over. Then probably I'm increasing the ability to notice the form and meaning together. So this is an important thing, and this is how you can actually set up your research. You can enhance input, and you can test, okay, for instance, I want my students to learn how to thank you, and I want them to be able to distinguish between formal and informal thank you, or thank you at the public level, thank you, like Oscar nomination speech kind of thank you. So I can just show them the video, but probably it wouldn't be enough, because they might be too taken by everything what is here. So I might just do subtitling. I might have an exercise or activity before they watch the video, so that the input is enhanced. It's not kind of flat, or it's not too diverse, so that again they don't notice, and they hear the exactly thank you, and I make them see the thank you in the input. So I'm enhancing the input, and versus the group that doesn't have this kind of enhancement and just watches the video, and then I'm asking them to perform thank you, and I'm giving them a role play, and I see what they're producing, and I can tell, well, a group that receives enhanced input actually produces better thank you than the group that didn't receive this kind of treatment. So yes, from here, noticing hypothesis is a really good thing. Another model you might consider, in particular if you want to do surveys of attitudes, it's Polsky's idea of learning and affective factors or variables within the particular learner. We call it individual learner differences, that learners differ in the way, in their attitudes, in their motivations, in their personality traits, in skills, probably difficult for us to measure, but this is something achievable within the classroom. So you can go with this model and follow it. Let's get this. So what to research? Again, when you look at your behaviors and the students' behaviors in the classroom, you can think, okay, I want to research what students actually do, the way they speak, the way they write, how they form questions, whatever. This is what students do. Or I can decide, I want to know what they know, what kind of rules they know, and whether they can formulate rules for me. For instance, in Russian language, we have a very complex system of verbs, of motion, and I might just want them to tell me what's the difference between those verbs and how to use them. And I just want to know if they know the rules. Or I might, also what is important for me to think about, what level of language, what domain of language I want to investigate. Phonology, lexicon, grammar, syntax, phonetics, like all this is important for me to know. Also, I can just go with this, beliefs and attitudes, and finally, I can investigate how students interact with each other, how students interact with a person, with a teacher, how students interact outside of the class with the language. If, for instance, they have native speaker friends, how often they meet with them, if they seek out opportunities for to use the language. All this is my data, and I can use it and come out with a nice study, relatively easy to execute. So, in terms of research types, probably I would suggest to distinguish them, not just, I said that, so it's kind of obvious. Do you control a production or exposure or not? If you control it, it's experimental study. If you don't control, you observe, this is observational ethnographic study, you don't do anything. If you already know your hypothesis and you want to establish causal relationship, if there is this, then that, then it's probably you should go with quantitative research and do regression analysis. Again, I'm talking statistics already. If you don't know statistics, most of departments have a contact person for statistics. So you can investigate and contact this person. If you need assistance with some simple stuff, I can help you because I do research with statistics. So, and we have statistics departments. So again, there are places to look into if you decide that you want to do quantitative studies. Or if it's just your first idea, you never thought about the field, you know that there is no literature on that, you just want to investigate how it actually works, you don't know how it is in reality, then it's exploratory study. You just want to describe it, what's happening. You don't want to make any kind of conclusions. At most, you can do correlation, but that's
Maria, did you say we could ask questions?
Absolutely.
Where you going?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I have so many questions. Let me start with the issue of quantitative and qualitative. When it comes for quantitative, you need a certain number of data, but with less commonly taught languages, in most cases, the data is not there, and it becomes skewed. So that's why I always encourage students to start with qualitative, because they need the number. And if you're dealing with French, Spanish, the number is there. But you're dealing with, Chui, even Yoruba, that I teach. So
I would say there are a few variables to consider. For instance, if you want to consider or you want to investigate production of a certain form, and a student produces a lot of this form, and this is an easily quantitative study. So yeah, I wouldn't say that just based on the language, if you don't have big enrollments, that you are kind of confined to qualitative studies. No, because you can produce and have lots of material statistically valuable, that you can reach statistical significance. That's what we call in statistics. You have to reach statistical significance with whatever you're doing. And for that, if you, for instance, if you talking abstractly, if you want to consider your students' behavior, how often they switch from first language to second language, say in the advanced class, and probably they don't do it often, and you only have 3 students in your class, then you need at least 30 examples for each group. Either 30 students or either 30 examples of certain production to be able to compare with another 30, number of 30. So this is our magical number to go with if you want to do statistics and you want to reach statistical significance.
My other question deals with where you draw the line between second language acquisition and foreign language acquisition. Because
it's really complex, yeah.
Exactly, because when you are studying a language in an environment where you are exposed to the language, definitely, and then you compare that with somebody studying a language in a foreign context, the result will be different.
And Kathleen Bardovi-Harley, who is the chair of the second language acquisition department, one of her first studies she did about 20 years ago, she came out and it was on Hungarian speakers and Hungarian learners of English. It was precisely a study on the difference of the context, learning context. You can see how students perform on the same kind of task if they learn English or other language in the country where the language is spoken versus in the country or in the context where language is not spoken. So thank you, Anthony, for bringing this up. The difference between foreign language versus second language, whether there is another context for students to participate in language practices. Yes, and you will definitely have very different results.
So, what led to my question with lots of these are scholars that you're referring to, Schmidt, Ellis. They are based on second language acquisition. They are all mostly doing second language acquisition where the context is different. So my question is, how do we apply their theory to the case of all of us here dealing with foreign language?
Oh, absolutely. Like noticing hypothesis, how you can not apply it regardless of the context. It works. Same with Bialystok's model. Of course, it's very important to know about the world, how the world operates, and to have knowledge, explicit knowledge of the language, and then some kind of implicit knowledge, what we call into language, that is kind of happening within you, but you really can't reach into it and know what's going on there because it's not you're not cognizant of those processes yet. So research designs, and they're pretty much obvious, and I bet most of you already know them and went through them as students probably. pre and post testing, between group comparison, cross-sectional comparison, cross-task comparison, longitudinal studies or surveys. Pre and post tests. What kind of research questions normally would be asked here? For instance, do students show linguistic gains after my course? I'm teaching first year Russian. I want to know if there's any changes, say, in their speaking production, or in their writing, or maybe in some grammatical form I want to know, or maybe just a number of words they know. So it's up to me. Again, we already discussed. It's up to me what I want to study. I'm choosing this, and then, okay, I'm decided I'm going to pre and post test them before they come, before they went through the class, and after they went through the class. Now what happens? Or if I specifically instruct them on something, like we already discussed, thank you, if I instruct them on how to produce, how to make thank you, and I tested them before they came to class and after I've done this instruction, and I've tested them afterwards or several weeks after that, and I see how they produce it. Here's my, basically here's my study. Coding is scoring. This is, it sounds complicated, but it's not. Like once you decide what you want to study, you score it and you code it, and it becomes less scary. And we can, like, once we are stop talking, or if you want to interrupt me now, we can just stop and I will show you things, and we can all discuss how to do it within your personal research, individual research agendas. And if it's a quantitative study, then you should probably go with t-test if you have two groups, or you can go with ANOVA if you have several more than two groups. And again, like if you want quantitative studies, we can talk about it. I will tell you what procedure you might want to use. Group comparison. What kind of research questions? It's already, again, like kind of easy to guess. What are the effects of implicit versus explicit instruction on students' learning? Again, I'm collecting data on particular form. I've decided. Again, a lot of this I already know. I've decided on what I'm studying, and I'm doing group comparison on that particular element. One of the groups received the treatment, the other didn't, or they received different treatments, and I compare them. And I'm using pre and post test, for instance, or just post test. Maybe neither of the groups ever had this experience with this form, so I don't really need the pre-test. I only do the post test, and I compare them. And here, again, depending on how many groups I have, I'm either using t-test or I'm using ANOVA here. Cross-sectional comparison. Most of our studies are going to be cross-sectional. It's one of the most popular designs in SLA studies. How it goes, for instance, most of the framing of your research questions will run like this. How proficiency levels or how linguistic proficiency affect, how does it affect students' performance of something? So basically you have several groups of students with different proficiency levels, and they perform some kind of task. This is your design. Those are students from different cross sections. They are different. The students are different. And again, you can do pre and post testing with them, you can do pedagogical intervention with them, or you can send them, but I'm not, I don't know, you send them to the community, a local community of the speakers of the language, and see how they do after it, and you run your testing. Cross-test comparison. For instance, you give students some kind of instruction, and you want to see, you told them how to use thank you. Well, already, like, I'm stuck with thank you, but you told them how to use thank you. And you give them role play, oral or role play, in writing. You give them the same task in writing, and you compare their production in writing versus oral. So this is, again, a legitimate research, and you can tell, oh, interesting, the input was oral, but somehow students better perform in writing rather than orally. And then you will go into potential or probable barriers that affected your students. Longitudinal studies. This is something to consider definitely, because those don't require numbers. You can just pick one student and follow the student, like a shadow here. But yes, and you follow the student, and you see how the student develops ability in something. Again, we coming back to our favorite flower. You already decided what you're studying with the student, whether you studied what he or she can do, what this person know, and how this person behaves, or a person's beliefs, how they're changing. And then you're doing your longitudinal study of this person and collecting the data. And again, oftentimes those are not quantitative. It's kind of easy. You can just describe what you see. They're very ethnographic in this way. So exploratory, go with it. Surveys, another very easy, if you're a beginner researcher, another very easy design to implement. And usually, I don't remember recently seeing any attitudinal study that would end up with hardcore stats. No, they simply compare percentage. They don't even run chi-square. It's statistical application, statistical procedure that defines significance within percentages, but they don't even do this. So I'm surprised. They're kind of okay with just showing the differences in percentage. So it's another thing to consider. And we already discussed it. And I just want to mention the study that came out in 2012 in foreign language annals. Just in passing, the researcher mentioned that in his institution, students scorn literary studies. They hate literary studies. If you include literature or culture in your classroom, then the students think that you're wasting their time. That's how they perceive instruction and culture. Any kind of diversion from grammar drills make them very upset. And I don't know whether it's true, but the author very convincingly said, and very powerfully in a certain tone of voice, said that, look what we're producing across the nation. We're producing students who have no respect for the culture. They only want to know language as a code. They don't want to know the language as a part of the culture, as a way to experience new worldview, as a way to see worlds differently. No, they only want it as another code for their own identity. So I was wondering, okay, this is a powerful statement. Have you done some kind of research, percentage, or you just base it on your classroom observations? So, of course, this is something worth studying, where the students actually believe in the relevance of cultural instruction in classrooms, in language classrooms. And qualitative methods, what you can do with them. You can do discourse analysis, you can do conversational analysis, you can do participant observation, interviews, case studies, and diaries. And again, with qualitative methods, you can go with just 1, 2 students. It's very relatively easy. And the questions to ask for this kind of research would be, how do learners construct their identities in their second language? Do they try to translate their first language identities? If I'm American macho, how do I do American macho in Russian or in Kurdish? Can I even do it does this placeholder exist? Does this kind of identity exist, or do I have to modify myself to become this kind of powerful male identity in culture? Or another question would be, how does textbook material relate to classroom interaction? For instance, if in my textbook, say I'm teaching in a class where I have 50% of very open-minded students, and maybe students, minority students, sexual minority students, and my materials only include straight people, no minority representatives. That might affect my learners because they don't see identities of people they can relate to. They see absolutely different people or absolutely fake people in the textbook. And textbook that I select don't really generate interest among my students. Then it's something to research. Or how second language is used in classroom to socialize. We already know that second language can be used just as an activity, as a signed activity. I put you in pairs and I'm saying, okay, do this exercise. But all I'm saying it in English, all my instruction is in English. So it's interesting to see how native language, how the target language is used in the classroom, or how students use it. Do they use it outside of activities? Do they actually speak to each other in this language? This is like something to research and detect the quality of